when I did the law clinic, the very first kind of way that I ever helped someone, it was they came in with a letter and it was just telling them what that letter said.
Mm.
And I was thinking, is this really going to help them? But they were so grateful afterwards.
Very easy to think that to help somebody from a legal practice point of view, or from a policy, politics, marketing, or anything else point of view, that you've got to always give an industry-based answer. The amount of times people come to me and say, so-and-so is really annoying me, he won't stop messaging me, he keeps sending me all of these text messages, he's essentially harassing me. And the answer is often quite simple. One, have you blocked his number? If you haven't, block it and then see how it is after that, because the last resort is taking something to court. There's always something that can be done outside and some common sense. And I think sometimes when you're so emotionally overpowered because it's you in the situation, you can't see the straightforward decision. And it's not always about coming with a very complicated legal answer. It's sometimes about coming with, being the one with the cool head and giving the answer that that person would be able to reach had they not been so emotionally overpowered.
I got a lot of satisfaction in my role as a prosecutor if I did have the opportunity to meet victims. If we were having a trial at court and I met them before the trial, and regardless of the outcome, I think a really important part of the job is to be able to coach people through really difficult situations. And even though I was an advocate, I think I'd find it extremely difficult to be in the witness box. So you could say, oh yeah, you get a lot of satisfaction from a conviction. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it's more about the impact that you have on individuals and making them feel safe. Like you say, the comfort side of it. You wouldn't really associate that with law, but I think that's really important.
I think it's like you're both saying, it's the things that you don't expect, they're the things that you're doing. And that's what I realised when I did the law clinic, the very first kind of way that I ever helped someone. It was they came in with a letter and it was just telling them what that letter said. And I was thinking, is this really going to help them? But they were so grateful afterwards. And it was just that clear head, having someone from that neutral perspective with a clear head to just kind of steer you in the right direction. Not everything has to be courts and kind of the way you see it. It's like you said, it's the last resort. It's often trying to help people, sometimes even see things for them to see things with a clear head. It's people are human at the end of the day, and everyone's heightened by emotions, and we're kind of there to just be a helping hand almost. And that is the biggest impact you often have on society, is helping them kind of steer them in the right direction. And yes, it might not necessarily be legal all the time, but that's the practical side of it.
Sammy, you're training with the Citizen Advice. How often do you find that you're in a situation where you've got to essentially think outside of the box?
Yeah, quite often, to be honest, because there'll be like sometimes when you come across certain things that you're not necessarily used to, and then that will make you think outside of the box because like it's not something that you're used to. Exactly. That makes sense.
Yeah. And do you find that sometimes people look to you for help, but really you can't always help everybody?
Yeah. I feel like when people come through the door, they just expect for you to have all of the answers, all of the legal points, etc. When that's not the case, when you're only there to interpret it from what you've been told.
Because just following up from that as well, this is something that occurred to me in the conversations. Sometimes do you feel that people come to you looking for certainty in an answer where maybe there isn't, because of the scope for reasonable interpretations of the law, or the way that previous decisions have taken one direction or another? So I mean, certainly in my teaching of law over the years, the one point I've had to get across is actually there aren't black and white answers. It's very nuanced. To use a phrase, it all depends. It's kind of very sort of particular and based around the contextual facts of the situation. Do you find that that can sometimes be a challenge, or at least in what you've done so far, to get that kind of point across?
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So if someone is looking to be told that, you know, what they want to get out of a situation is something that they will or they will not, and you say, well, actually, it's not as straightforward as that. We might need to look at these aspects of the facts, or we might need to look at whether this particular legal rule applies to you. Does that take clients by surprise, do you think? Do they think law is much more cut and dry?
Yeah, I feel like they do think that because, well, if you've got a problem and you're going into a lawyer's office, you're just going to expect that they know everything because they've already been there and done that. And in reality, that's not the case.
I think you'd be surprised how many times, as a practicing lawyer, the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Because for a large portion of it really does depend. Like you said, there's no black and white answer. And I think it's about thinking outside of the box and digging a little bit deeper, because people will only tell you what they want you to know. And I think especially you probably found this in crime, that you've got to ask the questions that the client doesn't want you to ask, and you've got to turn over a stone that that person is sat on and doesn't want to be turned over.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the vast majority of the time, I'd go into court and I'd have no idea what was going to happen. You know, people used to say, well, how do you know how long they're going to get in prison? Well, I've got no idea. I just have to present, you know, a narrative. I have to present the law as I interpret it, and then some of it is out of your hands. And I guess when, you know, you're in practice and people come to you with personal problems, every single problem is completely different, and the way that the law is applied to it is different as well. And I think as a law student, you'd probably expect, right, I'm asked a question and I can give the answer, and here's the answer, and that's the law. And it's not really like that. It's this is how the law works, and it depends, you
Yeah.
know.
I think there's always more than one
Yeah.
answer to things as well, but
Yeah.
the amount of time people think, oh, this is my issue, give me an answer or tell me what to do. And I think you realise that there's more than one option, there's always more than a single option. It's then prioritising these options, asking the difficult questions and seeing what's best for the individual. Everything really matters. And again, I think this is like rounds up law. And again, it's a type of course where if you want a clear-cut answer, there's other kind of degrees, but I think in this degree it's all about having an answer and justifying it through the facts that you're presented and asking the questions that need to be asked. One thing I actually realised when I was doing kind of essays was you could answer in an essay. They were expecting the lecturers for you to say, well, it depends on me asking this fictional client this question. And that is more than enough. That is a valid answer, and you would be given marks for that, because in reality, that's what it is. It depends. You need to ask these questions in order to give a justified answer. And yeah, that's something I definitely learnt.
I think you have to be very critical as well on a law
Yes.
degree. You have to critically, I think it's a word that actually gets used in the questions,
Yes, it
critically
does.
evaluate this piece of information. And that's what it's all about, critical evaluation, because you don't necessarily always give the answer that the person asking it wants to hear.
Yeah.
More often than not, the client asks, so I'd like to do this. And so it's, well, sorry, that's just not possible because the law will not allow for that. You need to do this, this and that to be able to do that. And you've missed out on that opportunity. Or for example, it's critically evaluating the position as to, you know, what does it really mean? What is the effect of it? And again, that doesn't just apply to a career in law, it applies to hundreds of careers.
Yeah, point weighing up the merits or viability of different options. I think that's central, to my mind anyway, to what we do as part of a law degree. When we're teaching law, when we're studying law, when we're researching law, I'm guessing from what we've been talking about as well, is a large part of legal practice. And I would also say, in some of the work that I've done, you know, when I've spoken with psychiatrists and people in medicine and healthcare that maybe expected there would be a cut and dry answer. And it's interesting, you know, people who might be working with the law, such as the Mental Health Act, that actually so much of it depends on that particular context, on the individual or the patient that you have in front of you, that you're sort of making decisions about with regard to, you know, say, risk of harm to themselves or risk of harm to others. It's a contextual matter that, yeah, you've got the wider legal principles, but then you should never forget that you've got a particular, you know, patient or client in front of you, and they have to be the focus of the application of the law.